The massive hall fell silent as Ambassador Zektar stood up from his seat. His tall, thin body moved with the grace that all hegemony people were known for. His skin was pale blue, and his large eyes looked around the room with anger. The Galactic Coalition Council had seen many arguments before, but today felt different. Commander Sarah Chen sat in the Earth section, her back straight, and her face calm. She wore her dark blue military uniform with pride. Her short black hair was neat, and her brown eyes watched everything carefully. She knew why they were all here today, and she was ready for what was coming. The council hall was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up high toward the ceiling. Hundreds of beings from different worlds sat in those seats. Some looked like giant insects, others were floating balls of light, and some appeared almost human, but with strange colors and shapes. All of them were looking at the Earth section with something between fear and disgust. Zektar began to speak. His voice was smooth and musical, the way all hegemony voices sounded. But there was ice in his words. "Fellow members of the coalition," he said, "we gather today to discuss a crime that shocks the very foundation of civilized space." He pressed a button on his desk, and a large screen appeared in the air above the center of the hall. The screen showed a star map with a red circle around one system. 3 weeks ago, in the Kepler 442 system, the humans committed acts that violate every law of war we hold sacred. Murmurs started around the hall. Sarah could hear words like barbarians and savages being whispered in dozens of different languages. She did not move or change her expression. For 3,000 years, Zektar continued, all civilized species have followed the sacred codes of warfare. These laws protect civilian populations, limit the destruction of war, and ensure that conflicts remain contained. They are the very basis of galactic peace. End quote. The screen changed to show video footage from the battle. Sarah watched as her own people's ships moved across the display. She remembered that day clearly. The hegemony fleet had come to teach the humans a lesson about staying in their own space. They had expected an easy victory against the young species from Earth. "Look at this footage," Zektar said, his voice getting louder. The humans used kinetic bombardment against populated areas. They targeted medical ships. They boarded enemy vessels with primitive weapons and engaged in hand-to-hand combat like wild animals. The video showed human marines in power armor cutting through the hull of a hegemony ship. They carried what looked like ancient rifles and metal blades. To the coalition members, this looked like something from the dark ages of space travel. But worst of all, Zektar said, pointing at Sarah, they used their own medical ships as bait. They painted targets on vessels that should have been protected under all laws of war. They turned healers into warriors and sanctuaries into traps. The footage showed what looked like a human hospital ship being attacked by hegemony forces. Then, suddenly, the medical ship opened fire with weapons that had been hidden inside its hull. Hegemony ships exploded one after another. The hall erupted in angry voices. Representatives from dozens of worlds stood up and shouted. Some called for Earth to be kicked out of the coalition. Others demanded that humans be forbidden from leaving their home system. A few even suggested that Earth should be placed under coalition control. Sarah stood up slowly. The hall became quiet as all eyes turned to her. She was much smaller than most of the other representatives, but something in the way she moved made everyone pay attention. "Honored representatives," she said in a clear, calm voice. "I am Commander Sarah Chen, of Earth's military forces. I was present at the battle in question. I am here to represent humanity's interests in these proceedings." Zektar looked at her with disgust. "Do you deny these charges?" "Human, the evidence is clear for all to see." Sarah looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. "I do not deny that human forces engaged in the actions you have described," she said. "Every piece of footage you have shown is accurate." This caused even more shouting in the hall. If she was admitting guilt, why was she here? "However," Sarah continued, raising her voice to be heard over the noise, "I believe this council should understand the full context of what happened before making any decisions." A new voice spoke from the center of the hall. It belonged to Judge Arbiter Morvek, of the Synthesis species. The Synthesis were known for being fair and neutral in all disputes. Morvek looked like a tall crystal formation that glowed with soft light. "The representative from Earth will have her chance to speak," Morvek said in a voice that sounded like singing. "But first, let us hear all charges clearly stated." Zektar nodded and turned back to the screen. The humans violated Article 7 of the Sacred Codes by using kinetic bombardment in a system with civilian populations. They violated Article 12 by targeting medical vessels. They violated Article 15 by engaging in close combat boarding actions. And they violated Article 23 by using medical ships as combat platforms. Each article appeared on the screen as Zektar spoke. The Sacred Codes had been written after a terrible war that nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. They were designed to make sure that war never became that destructive again. "These codes have kept peace for 3 millennia, said Ambassador Velneth, of the Aquatic Collective. Her voice came through a translator since her species communicated through sonic pulses in water. "Every civilized species has agreed to follow them. They are the foundation of our society. The humans have shown that they are not ready to join civilized space," added Representative Korth of the Mineral Alliance. His rocky body made grinding sounds as he spoke. "They fight like beasts, not like intelligent beings." Sarah listened to each speaker, her face showing no emotion. Inside, she was thinking about all the briefings she had received before coming here. Earth's military had studied every coalition species carefully. They had analyzed their tactics, their technology, and most importantly, their weaknesses. "The evidence speaks for itself," Zektar concluded. "The humans must face justice for these crimes. They must pay reparations to the families of those killed. They must agree to follow all sacred codes in future conflicts, and they must accept coalition oversight of their military forces." The hall filled with sounds of agreement. Representatives nodded, clicked, hummed, or made whatever sound their species used to show approval. Judge Arbiter Morvek's light grew brighter. "We will recess for 1 standard day to allow Earth to prepare its defense. When we return, Commander Chen will have the opportunity to explain her people's actions." As the representatives began to leave, Sarah remained in her seat. Her aide, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, leaned over to whisper in her ear. "Commander, they want to put us in cages. How are we going to explain this?" Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the hall. It was not a happy smile, but something that made Marcus feel both proud and slightly scared. "Marcus," she said quietly, "they have no idea what they're dealing with. Wait until they hear our side of the story." The next day began early for the coalition investigators. They had been given access to all the battle records from Kepler 442, and what they found made them more confused and worried with each hour that passed. Dr. Thiss of the Academic Consortium floated over a pile of data tablets in her laboratory. Her gaseous form shifted colors as she processed information, changing from calm blue to worried purple to alarmed red. She had been studying warfare for 600 years. But she had never seen anything like human military doctrine. "This makes no sense," she whispered to her assistant, a young hegemony scholar named Fentar. "Look at these training records. They practice something called urban warfare, where they fight in cities. They train to fight in zero gravity, in toxic atmospheres, underwater, and even in the vacuum of space itself." Fentar looked at the data with his large eyes growing even wider. But why would anyone want to fight in such terrible conditions? Civilized warfare happens in open space, with clear rules and safe distances. Dr. Thiss changed to a deep orange color that meant she was thinking hard. "That's not the strange part. Look at this section called acceptable losses. They actually plan for their own people to die in battle. They have calculations for how many deaths are worth achieving different objectives." This was completely alien to coalition thinking. For 3,000 years, warfare had been conducted with the goal of zero casualties on both sides when possible. Battles were more like elaborate dances where the side with better technology or strategy would force the other to surrender without anyone getting hurt. In another part of the station, War Speaker Thane of the Hegemony was meeting with military experts from 12 different coalition species. His pale blue skin was darker than usual, a sign of stress among his people. "I have reviewed the human tactics 17 times," he said to the assembled group. "Each time, I understand them less. They seem to plan for every possible way a battle could go wrong." General Crix of the Armored Corps made a grinding sound with his metal body. "Show them the boarding action footage again. I want to understand what I am seeing." The room's screens lit up with the video of human Marines cutting through a hegemony ship's hull. The humans moved fast and worked together like they had done this 1,000 times before. They carried weapons that shot small metal projectiles instead of energy beams. "Why do they use such primitive weapons?" asked Admiral Flux of the Energy Collective. Her form was pure electricity, and she found the human weapons hard to understand. "Plasma rifles are more efficient and cause less damage to ship systems." Thane paused the video at the moment when a human Marine hit a hegemony soldier with the stock of his rifle. "I believe that is exactly the point. They want to cause maximum damage to both equipment and personnel. Watch their movements. They are not trying to disable or capture. They are trying to kill." The word "kill" made several members of the group uncomfortable. In coalition warfare, the goal was always to force surrender, not to actually end lives. Death in battle was seen as a failure of tactics and planning. But the most disturbing part, Thane continued, is how organized they are about it. This is not random violence. Every action follows a plan. They have manuals that teach them how to kill efficiently. Meanwhile, in Earth's diplomatic quarters, Commander Chen was having a very different kind of meeting. She sat across from Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology. Between them lay dozens of files about coalition species and their military history. "Sarah," Dr. Vasquez said, "I've been studying these species for 15 years, ever since first contact. I think I understand why they're so shocked by our tactics." Commander Chen looked up from a report about hegemony ship design. "Tell me, none of these species evolved as predators, Dr. Vasquez explained. "The hegemony developed from herbivores that lived in trees. The synthesis grew from crystal formations that absorbed energy directly from their star. The aquatic collective came from filter feeders in deep oceans." Chen nodded slowly. "And humans? We're pursuit predators, Sarah. We evolved to chase down prey across long distances. We're designed by nature to be efficient killers. To them, we're literally the thing that their ancestors' worst nightmares were made of." Chen picked up another file, this one about coalition military history. "What about their warfare? How did they fight before the sacred codes?" Dr. Vasquez smiled sadly. "That's the thing. They barely fought at all. Their early wars were mostly about territory disputes and resource allocation. When they did fight, it was usually with technology that could destroy planets from safe distances." "The Great Dying," Chen said, remembering the historical briefings. "Exactly. 3,000 years ago, they had a war that killed trillions across dozens of star systems, not because they were trying to kill each other, but because they couldn't control the weapons they had built. The sacred codes were created to make sure that never happened again." Chen closed the file and looked out the window at the stars beyond the station. "So, their entire approach to warfare is based on avoiding destruction, not achieving victory." "Right. They see war as a problem to be solved with the minimum amount of harm. We see it as a contest to be won at any cost." In the Coalition archives, a different investigation was taking place. Archivist Prime Zeth Moore had been asked to research human military history. What he found in Earth's databases worried him greatly. The humans had sent their complete military records as part of the evidence for their defense. Zeth Moore had expected to find the history of a young species with little experience in warfare. Instead, he discovered that humans had been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history. 5,000 years of constant warfare, he said to his research team. Not just between different species, but between members of their own species. They have fought over land, resources, ideas, and things I cannot even understand. His assistant, a young being from the peaceful worlds, looked sick. How did they survive? How did they not destroy themselves? Zethmore pulled up human military doctrine from just their most recent century. Because they learned. Every war taught them new ways to fight. Every defeat made them think of better strategies. They turned warfare into a science. The files showed human conflicts with names like World War and Total War. The humans had fought battles with millions of participants. They had developed weapons that could destroy entire cities, and somehow, they had survived it all and kept learning. "Look at this document," Zethmore said, highlighting a text called The Art of War, written over 2,000 years ago. They were writing detailed guides on military strategy before most coalition species had even developed space travel. As night fell on the station, representatives from dozens of worlds sat in their quarters, thinking about what they had learned. The humans were not just primitive savages who happened to be good at fighting, they were a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Judge Arbiter Morvek spent the evening reviewing all the evidence. Tomorrow, the humans would give their defense. But already, Morvek was beginning to suspect that this case was not going to end the way anyone expected. In her quarters, Commander Chen finished reading the last of the Coalition military manuals. Then she opened her own tablet and began reviewing something very different. Earth's military combat doctrine for asymmetrical warfare. Tomorrow, she would show the galaxy what humans had really learned from 5,000 years of constant fighting. She smiled as she read the opening line of the manual. When fighting an enemy who follows predictable rules, the greatest advantage goes to those who understand that rules are just suggestions. The tribunal hall buzzed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy returned to their seats. Word had spread about the investigators' findings, and everyone knew that today's session would be unlike any in Coalition history. Judge Arbiter Morvek's crystal form glowed brightly as the session began. Before we hear Earth's defense, the tribunal will present its findings about the context of these events. Dr. Thys floated to the center of the hall, her gaseous form now a deep red color that showed how disturbed she was. "Honored representatives," she began. "Our investigation has revealed information that changes how we must view this case." She activated the display screen, showing a timeline of galactic history. 3,000 years ago, our civilization faced what we call the Great Dying. A war between the Zephyrian Empire and the Void Collective escalated beyond all control. The screen showed images of dead worlds and destroyed star systems. Even after 3 millennia, the pictures were hard to look at. Entire planets had been turned to glass. Some solar systems had no life left at all. 17 star systems were completely destroyed, Dr. Thys continued. Over 3 trillion beings died in just 50 years of fighting. The survivors were so horrified that they created the sacred codes to ensure it could never happen again. Ambassador Velneth of the Aquatic Collective spoke up from her water-filled chamber. The codes have kept peace for 3,000 years. They have prevented any conflict from growing beyond control. War Speaker Thane stood to address the assembly. The sacred codes work because everyone follows them. They limit weapon types, protect civilian areas, and ensure that wars end quickly with minimal loss of life. He paused and looked directly at Commander Chen. But they only work when both sides agree to follow them. The screen changed to show statistics from coalition conflicts over the past millennium. In our last 1,000 years, Thane explained, we have had 147 military conflicts. The average duration was 12 days. The average casualty count was fewer than 1,000 beings across both sides. Murmurs of approval went around the hall. This was what civilized warfare looked like. Quick, clean, and with minimal harm to anyone. Now, Thane said, his voice growing darker, let me show you what human warfare looks like. The screen filled with data from human history. The numbers were shocking. Wars that lasted years or even decades. Battles with casualty counts in the millions. Some conflicts where the entire male population of regions had been killed. They call some of their conflicts total war, Thane said with disgust. This means they consider everything and everyone a valid target. Civilians, infrastructure, cultural sites. Nothing is protected in human warfare. Representative Korth of the Mineral Alliance, made grinding sounds that indicated extreme disapproval. How did such a species survive? How did they not destroy themselves completely? Dr. Elena Vasquez stood up from the Earth section. She had been given permission to explain human nature to the tribunal. Honored representatives, may I help you understand why humans fight the way they do? Judge Arbiter Morvek's light pulsed once, giving permission. Dr. Vasquez walked to the center of the hall, looking small among the huge alien representatives. Every species here evolved from peaceful origins. You developed intelligence to solve problems, to cooperate, to build things. Humans are different. She activated her own display, showing Earth's evolutionary tree. Humans evolved from pursuit predators. Our ancestors survived by hunting animals larger and stronger than themselves. We did this by working in groups, using tools, and never giving up. The display showed early humans chasing a massive woolly mammoth across an ice field. This is called persistence hunting. We would chase one animal for days, taking turns running so that we never stopped. Eventually, our prey would collapse from exhaustion, and we would kill it. Several representatives made sounds of disgust. The idea of deliberately exhausting prey to death seemed cruel to species that had never needed to hunt for survival. This shaped everything about us, Dr. Vasquez continued. Our intelligence developed not for building or creating, but for predicting how our prey would behave. Our social structures developed around hunting groups. Even our bodies are designed for long-distance pursuit. She highlighted human physiology on the screen. We can run farther than almost any animal on our planet. We sweat to cool ourselves during long chases. We have excellent endurance and can function with very little food or water for extended periods. Ambassador Zektar interrupted. What does this have to do with violating the laws of civilized warfare? Dr. Vasquez turned to face him. Because we never stopped being pursuit predators, Ambassador. When humans go to war, we don't see it as a problem to be solved with minimum harm. We see it as a hunt that doesn't end until our prey can no longer fight back. The hall fell silent. The implications of what she was saying were frightening to species that had never needed to kill to survive. Furthermore, Dr. Vasquez added, humans have been at war almost continuously throughout our recorded history, not because we enjoy it, but because our planet forced us to compete for resources. We learned that the only way to ensure our group's survival was to become very good at defeating other groups. She brought up human military history again. Every war taught us new lessons. Every defeat made us adapt and improve. After 5,000 years, we have developed the most advanced military science in known space. General Crix of the Armored Corps spoke up. Are you saying that humans are naturally violent? No, Dr. Vasquez replied. I'm saying we're naturally competitive. Violence is just a tool we use when other methods fail. But we're very good at using that tool because our survival has depended on it for millions of years. Judge Arbiter Morvek's light dimmed as the implications sank in. Dr. Vasquez, are you suggesting that humans cannot follow the sacred codes because of their nature? I'm suggesting, Dr. Vasquez said carefully, that humans follow different rules because we learned different lessons. You learned that unlimited warfare leads to extinction. We learned that limited warfare leads to defeat. She returned to her seat as representatives around the hall began talking urgently among themselves. The cultural divide was becoming clear. The coalition species had developed their laws to prevent destruction. Humans had developed their tactics to ensure victory. War Speaker Thane stood again, his pale blue skin almost white with anger. This proves that humans are not ready for civilized society. They admit they cannot control their violent nature. They admit they will not follow our laws. The sacred codes exist for a reason, added Ambassador Velneth. Without them, we risk returning to the chaos of the Great Dying. If humans cannot accept this, they must be contained. Commander Chen had listened to everything without changing her expression. Now she stood up, and something in her movement made the entire hall fall silent. She looked around at the hundreds of alien representatives, her brown eyes calm but alert. Honored representatives, she said in a clear voice. You have heard about human nature and human history. You understand now that we see warfare differently than you do. But there is something important you still don't understand." She paused, and for just a moment, a slight smile appeared on her face. It wasn't a happy smile or a cruel smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something the others didn't. "You keep talking about your sacred codes as if they are universal laws of nature. But they're not. They're just rules you made up to solve your problems. And tomorrow, I'm going to explain why we made up different rules to solve ours." The hall erupted in chaos as representatives shouted questions and demands. But Commander Chen simply returned to her seat, that same small smile still on her face. She had given them just enough information to worry about what she would say next. The tribunal hall was completely silent as Commander Sarah Chen walked to the center of the chamber. Every representative from hundreds of worlds watched her with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and disgust. She moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death in battle and lived to tell about it. Judge Arbiter Morvek's crystal form pulsed with neutral white light. "Commander Chen, you may now present Earth's defense of the charges brought against your species." Sarah looked around the massive hall, taking a moment to meet the eyes of beings from dozens of different worlds. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the chamber. "Honored delegates," she began. "Yesterday you heard about human nature and human history. You learned that we evolved differently than you did. You discovered that we have been fighting wars for thousands of years while you have enjoyed peace." She paused and pressed a control on her wrist. The central display activated, showing the charges against humanity once again. "Ambassador Zektar has accused us of violating your sacred codes of warfare. He is absolutely correct. We did use kinetic bombardment in a populated system. We did target medical vessels. We did engage in boarding actions with primitive weapons. And we did disguise warships as medical craft." The admission sent murmurs through the hall. Most had expected denials or excuses, not a complete confession. "But here's what you don't understand," Sarah continued. And for the first time since entering the chamber, she smiled. It wasn't a cruel expression, or a happy one. It was the patient smile of a teacher explaining something obvious to students who weren't quite getting it. "You accuse us of violating your sacred codes of warfare. You are absolutely correct." Her smile grew wider. "But here's what you don't understand. That's precisely why we wrote our own." The chamber exploded in confused voices. Representatives stood up shouting questions in dozens of languages. Some demanded to know what she meant. Others called for her immediate arrest. Judge Arbiter Morvek had to pulse bright red lights several times to restore order. Sarah waited calmly for the noise to die down, then continued as if nothing had happened. "For the past year, since humanity joined the coalition, our military analysts have been studying your warfare extensively. We read every battle report from the last 1,000 years. We analyzed your tactics, your strategies, and your technology. And do you know what we discovered?" She gestured to the alien representatives around her. "We discovered that you fight like this is a game, with rules that everyone has agreed to follow. Your battles are predictable. Your strategies are limited by your codes. Your enemies always know exactly what you will and won't do." War Speaker Thane stood up, his pale blue skin dark with anger. "The sacred codes prevent unnecessary death and destruction. They have kept peace for 3 millennia. Your sacred codes," Sarah replied, "work perfectly when everyone follows them. But what happens when someone doesn't?" She activated the display again, this time showing coalition military statistics. "In your last 100 conflicts, how many times has an enemy refused to surrender when they should have? How many times has someone ignored your rules about protecting civilians or medical ships?" The answer appeared on the screen: 0 times. For 1,000 years, every single conflict had followed the sacred codes perfectly. "That's because," Sarah explained, "all of your enemies have been coalition species who agreed to the same rules you did. You've been fighting practice matches, not real wars." Representative Korth made grinding sounds of disagreement. "We have maintained order across hundreds of star systems. Our way of warfare prevents the chaos and destruction that your species seems to prefer." Sarah nodded. "You're absolutely right. Your system works beautifully for maintaining order among species who want to maintain order. But what happens when you meet someone who doesn't care about your order? She changed the display to show the Kepler 442 system before the battle. 3 weeks ago, War Speaker Thane brought a fleet to human space. His mission was to conduct what you call a police action. A show of force to make us fall in line with coalition policy. The display showed the hegemony ships in perfect formation, following standard coalition tactical doctrine. They had arranged themselves according to the sacred codes, with command ships in the rear, medical vessels clearly marked, and weapons powered but not immediately threatening. Your fleet followed every rule perfectly, Sarah said. You broadcast surrender frequencies on all standard channels. You gave us time to comply with your demands. You even brought medical ships to treat any wounded from both sides. Thane's expression grew confused. That is proper military procedure. We were trying to resolve the situation with minimal conflict. Exactly, Sarah said with that same patient smile. You were playing by your rules, but we weren't playing the same game. The display changed to show human fleet positions. Instead of the neat formations that coalition forces used, human ships were scattered across the system in what looked like random positions. Our ships were arranged according to a different set of rules. Rules designed not to minimize conflict, but to win it decisively. Every human vessel was positioned to achieve maximum tactical advantage if negotiations failed. She highlighted one section of the display. Your medical ships were clearly marked and protected by the sacred codes. Our medical ships were Q ships, disguised warships designed to look helpless while carrying enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The representatives began to understand what they were seeing. The humans hadn't broken the rules accidentally or out of ignorance. They had deliberately ignored the sacred codes and followed their own tactical doctrine instead. But this is impossible, said Ambassador Velneth from her water chamber. How did you know our tactics? How did you prepare for our specific approach? Sarah's smile became almost predatory. Because we've been studying you since the day we made contact. We analyzed every coalition battle for the past 1,000 years. We identified your standard formations, your typical strategies, and your predictable responses to different situations. She brought up a new display showing detailed analyses of coalition military doctrine. Did you know that in 73% of your conflicts, the side with superior technology wins without firing a shot? Did you know that you always arrange command ships in the same relative position? Did you know that your medical ships always approach battlefields from the same vector? The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just studied coalition history, they had turned it into a science. Your sacred codes, Sarah continued, assume that your enemies will fight like honorable beings who share your values. They work perfectly against opponents who want to minimize casualties and limit destruction. But they become major weaknesses when faced with an enemy who wants to win. Dr. Thys floated higher in her chamber, her gaseous form turning bright orange with excitement and fear. You're saying that you deliberately ignored our laws in order to gain tactical advantage? I'm saying, Sarah replied, that we followed our own laws instead of yours. Every action you witnessed at Kepler 442 was drawn from Human Military Combat Doctrine. Section 12. Asymmetrical Engagement Protocols. She activated a new display showing the Human Tactical Manual. These protocols were designed specifically for conflicts against technologically superior opponents who rely on conventional tactics and predictable strategies. The manual's table of contents appeared on the screen. Chapter titles included Exploiting Enemy Predictability, Turning Rules into Weaknesses, and Victory Through Superior Adaptation. Ambassador Zektar stood up, his voice shaking with either anger or fear. You wrote military doctrine specifically to defeat coalition forces? Sarah looked directly at him, her brown eyes calm and steady. We wrote military doctrine to defeat anyone who might threaten Earth's survival. The fact that it works particularly well against coalition tactics is just a bonus. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices were different. Instead of moral outrage, there was fear. Representatives were beginning to understand that they weren't dealing with primitive savages who had stumbled into effective tactics. They were facing a species that had systematically analyzed their weaknesses and developed counters for every strategy in their playbook. The sacred codes, Sarah said, as the noise died down, are beautiful. They represent the highest ideals of civilized behavior. They work perfectly for maintaining peace among species who want peace. Her expression became serious, and her voice took on an edge that made several representatives unconsciously move back in their seats. But we humans learned something different from our history. We learned that when your survival is at stake, the only law that truly matters is the one that keeps your people alive. She looked around the hall one more time, meeting the eyes of beings who were beginning to understand that everything they thought they knew about warfare had just become obsolete. We wrote our own rules, she concluded, because we couldn't afford the luxury of following yours. The silence in the tribunal hall was complete. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien representatives who were beginning to understand that their entire view of warfare had just been challenged. Judge Arbiter Morvek's crystal form pulsed with uncertain light. Commander Chen, are you stating that humanity deliberately developed tactics to exploit coalition military doctrine? I'm stating facts, Your Honor, Sarah replied calmly. But perhaps a demonstration would be clearer than words. She gestured to Lieutenant Rodriguez, who activated a holographic projector from the Earth section. The air above the chamber filled with a three-dimensional recreation of the Kepler 442 system. Let me show you what really happened 3 weeks ago, Sarah said. Not just what you saw, but what you missed. The hologram displayed the Hegemony fleet as it had appeared at the beginning of the encounter. 12 ships in perfect formation, following standard coalition doctrine exactly. War Speaker Thane's fleet entered our system with textbook precision, Sarah narrated. Command ship in the center rear, protected by 6 escort vessels. Medical ships clearly marked and positioned according to Article 15 of your sacred codes. Weapons charged but not locked on targets, as required by Article 7. Thane watched with growing unease as his own tactical decisions were displayed for the entire galaxy to see. From your perspective, Sarah continued, this was a routine police action. You had superior numbers, better technology, and the moral authority of coalition law. According to every precedent in your history, we should have surrendered immediately. The hologram showed the human response, or what had appeared to be the human response. 3 small ships approached the Hegemony fleet broadcasting surrender signals. But what you saw wasn't our fleet, Sarah said with that same patient smile. What you saw was exactly what we wanted you to see. The hologram shifted perspective, revealing the true positions of human ships throughout the system. They hadn't been hiding. They had been positioned in what looked like civilian traffic patterns, disguised as mining ships, cargo haulers, and research vessels. Dr. Thiss's gaseous form turned bright red with shock. Those weren't civilian ships? Every one was a disguised warship, Sarah confirmed. We've been expecting a coalition police action since the day we joined. We've had 12 months to prepare. The display zoomed in on one of the supposed medical ships approaching Thane's fleet. As they watched, the hologram peeled away the outer hull to reveal the true structure underneath. This isn't a medical ship with weapons added, Sarah explained. This is a battleship disguised as a medical ship. The medical equipment you can see on the surface is real and functional, but it's covering weapon systems that could destroy your entire fleet. Representative Korth made grinding sounds of disbelief. How is such deception possible? Our sensors would have detected military-grade weapons. Your sensors detected exactly what they were designed to detect, Sarah replied. Medical equipment that matched coalition standards, power signatures that looked like civilian systems, and hull compositions that appeared to be standard cargo materials. She highlighted the technical specifications on the display. We studied your sensor technology for a year. We learned exactly what you look for and how to hide what you needed to miss. It's called stealth technology, and humans have been developing it for centuries. The hologram returned to the moment when fighting began. But this time, it showed the battle from the human perspective. When you fired on our medical ship, Sarah continued, you weren't attacking a helpless target. You were triggering a carefully planned ambush. That ship's distress call was actually a signal for our real fleet to begin the attack. The display showed human ships throughout the system suddenly dropping their disguises and opening fire. But their targeting wasn't random. Every shot had been planned in advance. Your command ship was destroyed first because we knew from studying Coalition doctrine that losing command authority would paralyze your fleet's response. Your escort vessels were hit in specific locations that we knew would disable their weapons without destroying them completely. War Speaker Thane stood up, his pale blue skin almost white with shock. You knew our exact tactical procedures? We knew your procedures better than some of your own officers, Sarah said without emotion. We studied every battle report from the last 1,000 years. We identified 17 distinct patterns that Coalition forces follow in 95% of all encounters. The hologram showed the boarding actions that had horrified the Coalition representatives. Human Marines in power armor, cutting through hull plating and fighting their way through hegemony ships. This is where you made your biggest mistake, Sarah said, addressing Thane directly. You expected us to fight like Coalition species, standing off at safe distances, using energy weapons, avoiding close contact. Instead, we did exactly what our nature and training prepared us for. The display showed human Marines moving through the hegemony ships with terrifying efficiency. They weren't just fighting, they were hunting. Humans excel at close-quarters combat, Sarah explained to the horrified assembly. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Your people have never experienced anything like it, because Coalition warfare doesn't include personal combat. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood up from the Earth section. May I explain the psychological aspect, Commander? Sarah nodded. And Dr. Vasquez addressed the tribunal. What you witnessed wasn't just military tactics. It was the application of human evolutionary psychology to modern warfare. End quote. She gestured to the hologram showing human Marines working together with perfect coordination. Humans are pack hunters. We evolved to surround prey, cut off escape routes, and work together to bring down targets larger than ourselves. When we boarded your ships, we weren't just following military doctrine. We were following instincts that are millions of years old. The hall filled with disturbed murmurs as representatives began to understand that they had been defeated not just by superior tactics, but by an entirely different kind of intelligence. Sarah regained control of the presentation. But the most important thing you need to understand is this. Every action we took was proportionate and limited. This statement caused confusion throughout the hall. How could such devastating tactics be called limited? We could have destroyed your entire fleet within the first 5 minutes, Sarah continued matter-of-factly. Our disguised ships had enough firepower to turn all 12 of your vessels into debris. Instead, we disabled your weapons, captured your crews alive, and caused minimal casualties. The hologram showed the final moments of the battle. Hegemony ships floating dead in space, but intact. Crew members being evacuated to human medical ships, real ones this time. Even while ignoring your sacred codes, Sarah said, we followed our own rules about proportionate response. We achieved our tactical objectives with minimal loss of life on both sides. Ambassador Velneth spoke from her water chamber, her translated voice shaking. If you could have destroyed us completely, why didn't you? Sarah's expression became serious. Because despite what you think about human nature, we don't kill unnecessarily. We fight to win, not to destroy. War Speaker Thane's fleet came to intimidate us into compliance. We responded by demonstrating that intimidation works both ways. She deactivated the hologram and looked around the hall. The difference between human warfare and coalition warfare isn't that we're more violent, it's that we're more realistic about what violence can accomplish. Judge Arbiter Morvek's light pulsed slowly as the full implications became clear. Commander Chen, are you saying that humanity sees the sacred codes as inadequate? I'm saying they're appropriate for the problems they were designed to solve, Sarah replied diplomatically. But they create vulnerabilities that enemies who don't share your values can exploit. She paused and let her gaze sweep across the assembly once more. You wrote the sacred codes to prevent another great dying. We respect that goal, but we wrote our own codes to prevent a different kind of death. the slow extinction that comes from being unable to defend yourself against enemies who don't share your moral restraints. War Speaker Thane sat down heavily, looking like he had aged years in the past few hours. "What do you want from us?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "We want to coexist peacefully with the coalition. But we won't do it by making ourselves defenseless. Our military doctrine exists to protect Earth and our allies. It's not going away." The chamber erupted in worried voices as representatives discussed what this meant for galactic security. Some called for humanity to be expelled from the coalition. Others suggested that perhaps coalition military doctrine needed to be updated. Judge Arbiter Morvek pulsed bright white to restore order. "This tribunal will recess to consider these revelations. We will reconvene in one standard day to announce our decision." As representatives began filing out of the chamber, small groups formed throughout the hall. Coalition military officers huddled together, discussing human tactics in whispered conversations. Diplomats tried to figure out what this meant for galactic politics. Scientists wondered what other surprises humanity might have in store. Admiral Flux of the Energy Collective approached her aide as they left the chamber. "Contact Fleet, command immediately," she said. "Tell them I want a complete review of our tactical doctrine. If the humans could analyze our weaknesses so easily, others might be able to do the same." General Crix had the same thought. How many other species might have been studying our patterns? He wondered aloud. How many potential enemies know exactly how we fight? Similar conversations were happening throughout the station, as coalition leadership realized that their military superiority had always depended on enemies who followed the same rules they did. In her quarters that night, Sarah Chen sat with her senior staff, reviewing the day's events. "Do you think they'll vote to expel us from the coalition?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked. Sarah looked out the window at the stars beyond the station. Ships from dozens of worlds were visible in the distance, their crews probably having similar conversations about the future of galactic warfare. "I don't think they can afford to," she said finally. "We've just shown them that their entire military philosophy has a massive blind spot. They need time to figure out what that means." Dr. Vasquez joined them, looking tired but satisfied. "I've been monitoring coalition communications channels. Half their military commanders are demanding immediate tactical reviews. The other half are asking for detailed analyses of human military capabilities." "And," Sarah smiled. The same patient smile she had worn in the tribunal hall. "Good. Maybe now they'll understand that survival isn't about following rules. It's about being able to adapt when the rules change." Outside, the galaxy was beginning to learn a lesson that humans had known for thousands of years. In a universe where survival is never guaranteed, the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to play by your rules. The sacred codes had kept peace for 3 millennia by ensuring that everyone fought the same way. But humanity had just proven that peace built on shared assumptions was only as strong as those assumptions themselves. Tomorrow, the tribunal would announce its decision. But regardless of what they decided, the galaxy would never look at warfare the same way again. The age of predictable conflicts was over, and the age of human military doctrine had begun.